Okay, this one is like a I have no idea how to feel. Well, actually, I do know how to feel about it. I just don't know what like the correct way to feel about it is.
Yeah, go
How
ahead.
do you feel about like how do you feel about like pronouns like ma and mer and all that weird stuff? Like what
Um,
am I don't I genuinely I mean no ill will towards anyone. I don't know what to feel about these kind of things.
you're all good. I'm not as familiar with them myself. Usually, the way I approach most of these subjects, so I mean, like, there have been plenty of times throughout my career where it's like, there's like a new social issue that comes up, and it tends to be something which I'm unfamiliar with. Usually, the way that I approach these kind of subjects is to approach it more with like compassion and optimism. And the reason why is because like I understand that for a lot of people in society still, like talking about trans issues is still something really like obscure and like alien to them, right? Like even for as much as it's talked about today, most people hear that and they're like, "What the fuck is that?" And so when I hear about like neo pronouns is what they're called, right? And so when I hear about neo pronouns, it's like
Mhm.
obviously it's something very different from my own lived experience, but I tried to not like approach the idea with like immediate skepticism because I understand that people responded to my experience with immediate skepticism, and it's probably better as a policy matter to try and approach it more with like compassion. A really good example,
Yeah.
um, like a really good example of essentially like me using this kind of mentality in previous work was when a couple months ago, or I guess it's longer than that. It's almost probably a year. I had on another content creator named Vera Wild onto my stream. And that was a really cool discussion because essentially what happened was I had a discussion with her, or that like they go by they and she. We'll just say her. So I had a discussion with her over the fact that she is a trans person who does not have gender dysphoria, and that's very different from me because I have gender dysphoria, or I had it.
Mhm.
I mean, I still have it. But anyway, that's a whole nother, neither here nor there. But essentially, one issue in the trans community is like, do you need gender dysphoria to be authentically trans? Because a lot of people will look at that as like, oh, in order to be trans, you have to have this quality. Those people, the people who make that argument, tend to be like what we would term as like trans medicalists or true scum because they tend to be viewed very disparagingly in the community. Because essentially they exclude a lot of people who don't have dysphoria. And so, like, while I can acknowledge the harm that taking that kind of a view would lead someone to have, I also am coming at this from the position of essentially being morally lucky to begin with. I understand that that's like a bad position to take on a policy matter, but I also don't fully, or I didn't fully understand why
Yep.
the alternative was true, right? That actually we should have a definition that is inclusive of people who don't experience gender dysphoria. And so the way I responded was instead of trying to just like adopt the position, I guess, like in this case, the skeptic position of, oh, all right, well, I haven't seen any evidence, so I'm going to assume until proven otherwise that trans people need dysphoria. I actively went and sought out people who come from that lived experience because I knew that based on, based on discussion, that these people existed. And so Vera Wild was someone who I was directed to who does fit this experience. And essentially, I had her explain to me how she could be trans and still not have dysphoria. And that was a really good conversation. Um, and so, like,
Mhm.
the way that I would recommend you deal with this is probably to approach these kind of questions less with immediate skepticism and more with like a genuine, drive to learn, right? Like people with neopronouns, like I still don't understand that, but I would really like this, so like I'm talking from like my own personal experience. Like I really want to talk to people with neopronouns and know why they pick those, because a lot of people who end up picking these pronouns and like these forms of self-expression, like these are very deep and personal, like introspective questions, right? Like most people don't just
Absolutely.
come like most people don't just come to these decisions because like it's like the same kind of equivalence as picking what to wear in the morning. Like these are very
Mhm.
deep and introspective questions, and so like it's good for people in your position to go out and just like talk to people who are from that position and be like, hey, I understand you use these pronouns. That's very different from my understanding. Do you mind if you just like kind of explain to me what's up, right? And that, mind you don't want to you don't want to ever like put someone in the spot to like defend the validity of their existence, but like go in with a genuine
Absolutely.
desire to learn, right? And I think that
Yeah.
can carry a long way.
Yeah, and just like just so we're clear, like that's generally like the position I come from. Like if someone ever if I ever met someone in person and they're like, "Listen, can you call me by XYZ or whatever?" I don't care, man. It doesn't affect me in any way. Sure, of course. Like
Mhm.
and like I'll always like try to go out and seek. That's why I'm doing this talk right now. Is
Yeah.
because I have a lot of like intuitional like this is good, this is bad, but I think you're like in a unique position, I guess I would say, to like answer these about like these issues like in a very like intelligent way, at least from what I've heard you talk about.
Eh,
Because like I can hear Destiny, talk, yell in my ear 30 years about how whatever, but like
right. Yeah,
after a
yeah,
while
yeah.
I need
I
a
mean,
different
like,
pace.
it's interesting because, like, from what I gather from this whole, I don't know how much you've been following all the recent drama.
Oh, I followed it. It's a very nice meme.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. But I mean, like, the interesting thing that I've taken away from it is that, like, while we certainly think in very similar ways, from what I can reasonably tell, we definitely have different ways of kind of approaching certain discussions, right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, I like being able to kind of be here and just kind of like, talk to people and walk through these kind of things. Like, I'm a very chill, like, laid back. I mean, like, sometimes I can be super heated if I really want to be. Like, I don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
I like having friends. I like being friends with people. Um, and so, yeah, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I'm perfectly fine answering. And obviously, like, these are some questions that, like, it can be hard because, like, some people may like legitimately want to have some of these questions answered, but like, it can be very hard to find some people who will answer them because they can be sensitive, right? But it is very important to be able to talk about them because if not, then we get into like, we end up in the situation where essentially we're just kind of beating the idea that like, oh, you have to believe things X, Y, and Z. You end up with a bunch of morally lucky people, and we get into the problems that we had earlier.